at CIFOR eCraft in Nairobi, Kenya. And today we have a really great session, so we're going to mix it up quite a bit. So here's our run of show. Coffee. Everyone's had coffee, I hope, and some snacks. Then we'll have a keynote speech by Dr. Ratan Lal on video. We'll share the results back of the Menti. Then we have a first panel, and I've already given a hint of who's on our panel. These will be practitioners in the field. These will be restoration stewards. These will be leaders of big initiatives working on soil health. So then we'll have a summary of the panel by the UNCCD. Then we'll have a second keynote speech to kind of demonstrate the role of public and private finance into scaling soil health. And then there'll be a second panel that will really be highlighting the need for this public-private finance. And then closing remarks. So on the next slide, we have the welcome. Why are we here today? We are here because there's a need for multi-stakeholder action, because healthy soil is central to ecosystem restoration, climate change, mitigation and adaptation, as well as food and nutrition security. And I think everyone in this room is well aware of the central role soil plays. On the next slide, I just highlight the statistic that we all know from FAO. 95% of our food comes from soil. But it is also, soil is the very foundation of our food systems. And it provides several ecosystem services vital for life on land. The next slide just highlights how many SDGs, actually, the next slide, highlights how many SDGs really rely on healthy soil. And I know we're at the UNCCD here, so we are very familiar with SDG 15, and specifically 15.3 on land degradation neutrality, which has soil organic carbon right there as an indicator. The next slide. The next slide just shows that while we realize how important healthy soil is, every year we're still seeing more and more of our land being degraded. And I hope at the next COP we will absolutely be able to say, yes, our restoration efforts have been successful. We have no longer increased the land that is degraded. The IPBES report says 3.2 billion people are negatively affected. The Global Land Outlook report is saying between 20 and 40% of our land is degraded. Let's make sure the Global Land Outlook 3 shows a decrease. That means we need to double, triple our efforts to restore degraded soil. Next slide. So on the next slide, I just highlight one of the many coalitions that are being formed. So this is the Coalition of Action for Soil Health. The next slide basically shows the goal. It's simple, it's clear, but it needs all of us. The goal is to scale soil health globally. But that means we need to acknowledge what is constraining the adoption of healthy soil practices. So the coalition has outlined 4 key areas. Monitoring, and for those of you who play the video, don't worry, it's only 4 minutes. I've watched it like 6 times. It's fantastic. Of Dr. Ratan Lal. So here we are. Thanks, Sabrina.
Leanne, Magdalena, Kelly, everybody else who is doing a great job in organizing the events for CASH, especially with regard to healthy soil and healthy planet. Humanity in the present time is in the grip of 3 C's: climate change, conflict, and COVID. And unfortunately, these lead to refugees, hunger, malnutrition, inflation, soil degradation, and both culprit and victim being 7.9 billion people. We have responsibility, and I'm very glad that we are organizing this event. The Keeling curve shows that the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere as May 1 a week ago is about 420 parts per million, and going very rapidly at the rate of about 2 parts per million every year, maybe even more. That us the connection between soil health and human health. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hits to everything else in the universe. Therefore, soil health is related to plant health, animal health, human health, environment health, and of course the planetary processes. I'd like to say a few words about food. Food is a very important component and it is essential to human health. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need. And when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. And correct healthy diet comes from healthy soil, because it affects the food production system, affects the health of soil, plants, animal, people, ecosystem, and the planet itself. So per capita emission from some countries need to be mentioned. US about 16 tons of CO2 per person per year, China 8, India 2, world 4.5, Africa is about 2 or less. Carbon footprint of diet, meat liver 3.3 megagram of CO2 per person per year for 2,600 calories. Average American diet 2.5, no beef 1.9, vegetarian 1.7, vegan 1.5. It's your choice how you wish to have your diet. Global food waste we must address when avoidable, because landfills release the gases and 1.4 gigaton of food is wasted annually. If food waste is a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Food waste emission per person per year, North America 900 kilogram of CO2 per year, industrialized Asia 800, Europe 700, Latin America 540, North Africa 350, South Asia 350. And lastly, there is a conflict and hunger, especially the present conflict. Hunger and conflicts, mutually reinforcing processes, are driven by human greed and political agenda. Therefore, nature positive agriculture is something we can all do under cash, because it is something absolutely essential to promote peace and harmony following the One Health concept that we talked about. Through several practices that you will discuss in this meeting related to regenerative agriculture and farming carbon, so that farmers can get some income from it. The goal is to return land to nature by 2100. Half of the land under agriculture at present, 5 billion hectares of it, must be returned as much as 2.5 million hectares back to nature by reducing food waste, narrowing the crop yield gap, eating healthy diet, promoting urban farming, and the soil-less production system. Have a great event. Thank you.
Great. So I think, Dr. Lal has provided us with the real numbers on carbon, which we all know he's amazing to come out. So while the panelists come up, I'm not going to call them up because I'm going to give them their own time to introduce themselves. I'll ask Magdalena to share the slide of Magdalena, to share the Menti poll. So their first panel, just come on up, and I'm not calling you individually. I'll let you introduce yourselves. So I am very curious who's in the room. So we'll see the results of the first Menti poll as our panelists make their way. And I see Vera's there and Moses. Yep, please come. Yep, great. Is she going to share? Hi, Adrian. Great. And Vera. So I know panelists are not used to, speed introductions. So I'm going to allow them 1 minute with a timer, each panelist will have 1 minute to introduce themselves and the objective of their initiative. After that, we will be able to ask detailed questions, okay? So, looks like we have our Menti poll. Oh my goodness, this never happens. More researchers, NGOs, other, private sector. Okay, I'm very curious what other is. Next slide. And the next slide, which I find very interesting to ask this question, because some of us we've been working on soil health for a long time, and we just assume that everyone has the same perception of what soil health is. And when we start working from that basis and not understanding where the rest of the people are from, then we find we're talking around each other. So we asked the question, what does soil health mean to you? So I hope everybody answered it, and we may or may not get those results. But the idea is to see what is our starting point, because obviously we're all coming from a different place, and so understanding that difference is really important. All right, okay, cool. Biodiversity, nutrition. I don't have my glasses on, so I have to come quite close. Life, food, health, food production, health again, soil fertility, lots of biodiversity. Oh, undegraded soils. This is fantastic. Thanks for filling this out. So this is the people online, the people in the room, what soil health means to you. That is absolutely fantastic. So now I'm going to give each panelist 1 minute, say your name, your organization, and the objective. It's a speed round.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee. I tried to be really speedy. So my name is Claudia Schepp. I'm from the Executive Secretariat from the CAP per Mill Initiative. And I would say you can summarize our mission as we would like to promote and support the transition towards agroecology and regenerative practices in order to foster soil health for food security and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. I'm Joel Houdano. I'm from Benin, and I'm president of NGO Land and Health Association. I'm scientist also from research unit of tropical mycology and soil plant fungi interaction from University of Baraco. Our institution is has as objective to make the promotion of land health and the utilization of fungi to restore land in Benin. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Adrian Leitoro. I'm the GLF Restoration Steward for the 2022 for the drylands. We work in northern Kenya with local communities to conserve biodiversity and to restore the ecosystems in a way that recognizes the community structures and local knowledge. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Vera Berger. I'm a Senior Land and Water Officer at the Land and Water Division of FAO. And actually, the Land and Water Division promotes, I think, the 4 betters of FAO in our new strategy, which is better production, better environment, better life, and better nutrition. And only that we can achieve that only if we have healthy soils in order to produce healthy food. And for that, we also have the Global Soil Partnership, which promotes healthy soils in the world.
Yeah, I'm Moses Isavide from Ustema University. I'm a soil scientist and involved in research that aims at promoting sustainable soil management with the eventual adoption of practices that can put farmers in a better position to have food and money in their pockets. Thank you.
That was amazing because I actually had my 1 minute timer and you didn't hear it. No one went over a minute. That's a really important skill. So excellent. Thank you so much, panelists. This is awesome. So Claudia, the first question for you. Please tell us, elaborate on the role of 4 per Mill initiative. And speak on the growing interest that you've seen over time in soil health and the real need to find synergies across all of these initiatives, some of which are represented here. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Lee. Well, first of all, let me say it's great to see that nowadays we have so many different initiatives who are really promoting this topic of soil health. Well, there are so many things to be done, and it's impossible for just one organization to take up all the tasks. So I guess our main, well, like we as CAT per Mill, we have four principal matters which we want to bring forward. So on the one hand, it's advocacy, and I'm sure we join forces, especially in this one, with the others. So to make sure that soil health is really represented in relevant policies at all levels, but at the same time we try to promote and try to foster the communication with science, so to see where are the scientific gaps and what do farmers in the field think, what is missing, what do politicians think which is missing, and to bring together these different views. And the third point is maybe to really make farmers or practitioners of all kinds interact amongst each other. So yes, to foster an exchange, make them share best practices and lessons learned in that sense. Yes, maybe so far for now.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And we have an esteemed colleague that I would like to interrupt our panel to give her the floor. Miriam Medal. So Miriam, slide. Miriam Medal Garcia is part of the UNCCD Secretariat. She's also our newest fan of soil health. And so, Miriam, we showed a really nice word cloud of what soil health means to everyone. And I know you didn't do the Menti, so please add that to your opening remarks. Miriam, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee, and I am sorry for interrupting you. As you know, we are now in full negotiating mode in the COW, the CST, and the CREEC, so there are a lot of competing priorities for the Secretariat right now, but I still wanted to stop and just to congratulate really everybody for the launching of the coalition. In the UNCCD, I mean, soils and land is really our core, it's in our core mandate. However, we still need to do much more in the context of the convention to put the emphasis on soils health. It's something that perhaps because we are all dealing with the certification, land degradation, and drought, we take it for granted, and we don't really push to have the real conversations, for example, about legislation around soils health, about regulations, and about how important it is that a healthy soil to pursue the objectives of the convention and achieve land degradation neutrality. So we are very happy and very honored to be supporting, of course, from the background, the coalition. We also hope that we will find a very good working mode with the Global Soils Partnership that is coordinated by FAO. And I think my last point would be on the importance of collaboration across the board. So we have member states, parties that are very much interested in this coalition, but the beauty of coalitions is that they can incorporate other stakeholders. And we are in a time of inclusive multilateralism, where we really, what we need is the contribution from all sectors of society, academia, the business sector, and I would also say parliamentarians and local communities and indigenous peoples. So I am very, very sorry that I am interrupting you. I did not want to not come, and I will have to leave after 5 minutes. So congratulations. I wish you all success for the rest of the deliberations. And after the COP, I do hope and expect, and I promise that the UNCCD will get definitely more involved in this work. Thank you very much.
She gets a cash sticker. Thank you so much, Miriam. Actually, just feel free to just grab a coffee and go ahead. Oh, and you were right on time. This is great. Thank you so much. Great. So thank you, Claudia, for your remarks. And I think it was perfect because she's talking about collaboration, synergies across initiatives. Now I will give the floor to Raul, and you have 4.5 minutes. And don't worry, your slides will be there. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to present for 5 minutes our concept of restoration of land in arid and semi-arid region of Benin. Next slide, please. Yes, okay. Each day in Africa, farmers wake up and wonder what I'm going to burn today. This is the reality each day in Africa. This picture, I took them last week, just on field in northern Benin in one of our forests. And the reality is that farmers destroy the forest because the demography or lack of fertile land. So, next slide. Farmers don't know the concept of sustainable land management, and or never heard about it. And they exploit their farm. They use a lot of pesticide, a lot of chemical fertilizer, and they don't know that they don't use agroforestry, and these management option mean the degradation of soil, as you see. In Benin, we have 60% of land that are degraded, and we should restore it to transform or to convert them in forest or fertile land for population. But how to transform destroyed soil to regain its health? It's a very important question. Our approach of restoration in Benin is based on deep knowledge of soil food web. In the soil, after the plant, the root of the plant, we have organisms that in symbiosis with a plant, that is fungi or bacteria. We have also another type of fungi and bacteria. Fungi and bacteria is like grasses in savanna. Without grasses, there is no herbivory, there is no carnivory, and so on, and the biodiversity decreases. And the fungi and bacteria constitute the first element on trophic chain in the soil. So, to bring back biodiversity in the soil, we need to bring back bacteria and fungi in the soil. And it is important for restoration program to choose a different tree that in partnership firstly with fungi and after with bacteria. Next slide, please. When we choose the plant which is in symbiosis with fungi, we observe that the root of plant explore deeply the soil, and but fungi help plant and facilitate nutrition of plant. Next slide. Yes, yes. And the second step is to choose the plant in association, in symbiosis with bacteria, which facilitate the absorption of nitrogen and the nutrition of plant. The first step is to choose plant that grow up in degraded land, that grow up easily in degraded land, as shea tree. Next slide. As shea tree, and the combination of three types of a plant can help to restore easily and quickly the land, the degraded land in dry land and semi-arid region.
Great.
Thank you.
And actually, thank you so much, because I'm pretty sure this is the first time soil biology has been mentioned in such detail at the COP. Although Elizabeth Imrema yesterday did mention soil biodiversity and how it should be incorporated in the CBD. So thank you so much for that.
Welcome.
Yeah, and please visit our eCraft lab. We have a fantastic soil biology lab. So Adrian, we're not counting number of years here, but I do believe you are the Global Landscape Forum youth representative. I'm also a youth, by the way. So, as you can tell. So, please, you have 4 minutes to just describe your personal experience with land degradation and what really motivated you to found People and Nature as One.
Yeah, thank you for that. As a representative of the Global, of course, Landscapes Forum and a restoration steward and a youth practitioner on the ground, one of the main motivating factors for me to actually found Nature and People as One, not Nature and People as One, it was, we needed to, restoration has to take a different approach, which is how do we get our communities have so much knowledge, have so much knowledge about the landscapes, right? They've been living in these landscapes for the longest time. So I needed to find a way to first recognize that those structures, recognize that knowledge, and then bring in the ecosystem restoration, the wildlife conservation, the biodiversity conservation, because then you have a more robust, we call it nature-based solution, right? Because you have taken advantage of existing structures and systems, but also we needed to have, youth needed to take up these spaces, right? We are always told you're the leaders of tomorrow, but no, we're the leaders of now. So we need to actively take up these spaces at this time to be able, because this land is, this is going to be left to us, right? In a few years, we will be the ones doing all the work that everybody is trying to do. And when we talk about ecosystem restoration, it's the youth who are the future of ecosystem restoration. So that was the key motivation, getting our communities more involved and getting benefits, right? Going down to the bottom level, the grassroots level, translating the global, because my expertise and I've done my master's in climate change adaptation. How do I translate that to our communities at the local level? I hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for reminding us that it is the youth that will be left with the environment. Vera, thank you so much for joining this panel and for representing FAO. So I give you the floor and to talk about Global Soil Partnership, to talk about the amazing reports that have been released and launched this week continuously. I feel like every day there's a new FAO report being launched. So we're really happy to have you here to give us the firsthand experience. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very glad to be here because I think this is an important opportunity to strengthen collaboration. As I mentioned yesterday, already in 2012, realizing the importance of sustainable soil management for food production, you know, because as far we're interested in producing food. No, it's just the wind. When it stops, it stops. It's the wind which makes noise. I'm sitting in the wind channel. So in 2012, the Global Soil Partnership was created, and it's already now having 168 countries participating in the Global Soil Partnership. And the Global Soil Partnership looks at different things. You were saying soil biodiversity. Last year we had a very big symposium on soil biodiversity, where actually Ms. Rema participated. We're working with the convention on that. We're looking into normative things. We're looking into legal issues. We've got something called soil lag. So they're looking into legal issues. So we recognize that, in 2015, when there was the International Year of Soils, there was an analysis of the state of soils worldwide, and there were like 10 issues which were identified, like misuse or overuse of fertilizers and agrochemicals, monocropping, excessive tillage, removal of vegetation cover, absence of organic matter, lack of well-designed drainage systems, irrigation without considering soil suitability, and inadequate waste management and disposal. So we know that there is problems with soil sealing, with soil contamination, with different things. So the Global Soil Partnership took on every year to look at in one of the topics. So like this year was soil biodiversity. Last year it was, I think, organic matter. So it's a pollution. So every year they're looking at different issues. And I brought, there is a web page with all the documents which have been produced by the GSP. Looking into legal issues, into policy issues, but also into technical issues, and supporting the communities in achieving sustainable soil management. Yesterday I also shared one publication which is looking into sustainable voluntary guidelines of sustainable soil management, which basically looks at the 10 issues which have to be dealt with. And we also have a program which is very much based on the farmer field schools, which is called Soil Doctors, because we think that if we want to change the way the soil, or if we want to get healthy soils, we need people to understand the importance of soils, how the soils function, what you have to be doing, and that is reached better when you work at the community with the people together, and they understand. They have little soil labs and measure the pH of the soil and all this kind of things, but themselves, so that they understand what happens in the soil and what they have to do in order to be able to. And there is, I think there would be possibilities to also link up with youth and see how we can do that. So I think there is a huge program we have, and I think, what Medium said, we need to see how we can link better, so that these efforts are not duplicated, but that we can really one support the other. And okay, this is perhaps at another level, but I think there is a lot of material. If you go to the FAO booth, you can find the catalog where all these publications are, So there is a lot, and there is a lot going on policy level, but also on the ground. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to continue working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Vera, for giving us the FAO perspective and sharing some of the recent breakthroughs in the FAO reports. So now our final panelist, thank you so much, Moses, for joining us from Uganda. You're also linked with the UNCCD as the focal point in Uganda, and I would like you to speak on examples from Uganda and how the journey has been in reaching some of the land degradation neutrality targets to improve soil health. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. With the focus on land degradation neutrality, we've been mostly involved in land use planning activities or initiatives in the drier parts of the country, and we've used these examples of the projects there to see how can we implement land degradation or integrate land degradation into the existing planning initiatives. And there are several experiences that we've seen here. One is that land degradation neutrality, to be integrated properly, will require one, involvement of the National Planning Authority at a higher level, so that the National Planning Authority ensures that every plan that comes and is included in the budget has an element of the balance sheet, the LDN balance sheet, as a basis for budgeting activities that are going to be done by the different departments. Then also the challenge is about because we have the targets that have been set at national level, regional level, and the challenge is if you are implementing land use plans at the parish and village levels, how are these targets still relevant at the village level? Because the data set, the scales at which they are used and all that is very different at the scale at which you are implementing at the village. So that is also a challenge that we've seen. It means that we have to set new targets when we are working at village level. And that means also capacity has to be built at that level where the technical staff who are involved in extension activities are involved in the planning. And then also the other challenge we found is that when you present LDN and land use planning as two different approaches, then the staff get confused. They say, now, you're talking of integrated land use planning, you're talking of LDN. Now, they seem to be the same. How do we? So we are thinking that as we revise our guidelines for land use planning, we integrate LDN within those guidelines, and we still present it as one land use planning guidelines without giving an impression that LDN is a different approach to land use planning and all that. So that is also another challenge that we've found. And of course, we also need to make sure that when we are selling this idea to our higher authorities, there is a way it can be received without thinking that we are stopping them from doing certain things. For example, if you say, if you cut a forest, you replace the same forest, the leader will think that, okay, then we can cut this forest and replace it elsewhere. Now, that one also is a challenge to explain to leaders. But overall, we are seeing LDN as being a very positive approach and a way of improving soil health and the productivity. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So can we have a round of applause for our amazing panel? I really feel grounded in what the panel has presented, from implementation to the roots and the biology to how to implement LDN on the ground. I mean, this is exactly what we need to be remembering. We're here because we want to implement and scale soil health globally. Now, despite all of the fun we've had setting up, I would really like to make sure people in the room, people online, have some engagement before we move on to the very serious. Okay, don't step here. Good thing I do yoga. Okay, so that we get some questions before we move on to the financial aspect. Thank you, Tor. Okay, so I'd like to give the first question to an invisible hand I saw. Please introduce yourself. Watch out, watch out.
My name is Bob Tansey. Can you hear me all right? Thank you. Well, I'm humbled because I'm not a scientist. And don't know if this is exactly a question, but I welcome any responses. And I'm going to say who I am, and I'm actually going to say my email address, maybe more than once. So I'm Bob Tansey from the Nature Conservancy. I'm our global policy lead for agriculture. My email is rtansey, R-T-A-N-S-E-Y, at tnc.org, rtansey@tnc.org. rtansey@tnc.org. Thank you. So two things. This is all just wonderful, and there's lots of indications across all three of the Sustainable Development Conventions that thinking and practice is moving in the direction of valuing healthy soils. So next month, like some others here, I will be in Nairobi for working sessions of the Convention on Biodiversity. And I was at such sessions in Geneva in March, and it appears to me that the parties to that convention have not yet grasped this. They've not put it into action. The text around sustainable management, Target 10 is very vague, and I would like to work with other friends, like our friend Martina from WWF, but the coalition, and come up with what do we think, those who really, really care about healthy soils, who honor that the FAO has given that technical guidance to the CBD. How do you define that in a target, and where do you go with measures and indicators? Is it soil, organic matter, et cetera? But got to get the parties around that target. So please, rtansey@tnc.org, shamelessly. And then we kicked off yesterday morning, together with the Secretariat to the CCD, the beginnings of an action coalition for West Africa. So we are trying to bring together a dozen or 20 important organizations and actors to create what could be the modern day largest movement for reinvesting in soils. And if you're interested, please be in touch.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much. I do think I saw a real hand, right? Please go ahead, introduce yourself and give your comment question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lynn Kota. I am from Eswatini. I have questions for the two young men. The first from Benin. To say that, you know, a lot of the time we're now talking about the huge drive to agricultural production and productivity. And sometimes it's very difficult to say that in one sentence. Commercialization of agriculture, you know, production and productivity. Because when we want to produce at a large scale, at a commercial scale, sometimes it's imperative or it's perceived as being imperative, you know, to use, you know, a lot of chemical inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, and so on. And then what do you think are any interventions that can be done to dispel the myth, if it is a myth, that, you know, you cannot produce at a commercial scale while conserving the health of the soil? And then to the other young men, I would like to actually ask about the youth, you know, to say that you work with the youth at the grassroots level, and their involvement, what really is their involvement in the work that you do? Are there any ways in which you incentivize them to sort of care about the health of the soil when there is so much else that many of our youth have to care about, besides the health of the soil, because the responsibility of the health of the soil and the productivity that comes from the soil, it's their age, it's not their responsibility, or so they think. So what incentives, do you have to sort of encourage them to care? Thanks.
Thank you so much. So, Raul, you have 30 seconds to answer the first question, and then Adrian, please turn on your mic.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. For the health of the soil health is based mostly on the biodiversity, the soil biodiversity. We know that it is hard to not use chemical fertilizer and pesticide to grow up food on land, but when we trying to train farmers, we advise them to bring the two methods up to provide to the soil organic matter and fertilizer in the first step. And after, when they realize that their soil begin to be healthy, they decrease the amount of fertilizer and increase the amount of organic matter supply. So this is the method you use on feed in Benin. And it is important to say that we, in our laboratory, we study the impact of using of fertilizer and pesticide on biodiversity of soil, mostly on fungi. And we noticed that in the soil, when we have a great quantity of nitrogen, we have less biodiversity, less species diversity of fungi in the soil. So using each day fertilizer or pesticide is not good for biodiversity, for soil biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. To answer how we get the youth involved, I think we've heard from Vera saying, we need to have these soil labs. I think the first place is we need more young people aware of the importance of the soils, right? This information is not out there, and it's something that we should definitely be looking at doing, and getting youth to actually do seeing is believing, right? If we're able to have places where we can be able to see this soil health actively being implemented by the youth, then it motivates. It has that multiplier effect, which gets more people involved. And the youth, they present this opportunity because we are the most connected generation, right? In terms of social media, in terms of the globally, right? They present this opportunity to actually drive this agenda for the soils. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm very inspired, actually. I've been so inspired the last few years of the role of youth to really make change. Thank you so much. So with that, I would like to conclude this panel discussion. Huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. And as our panelists go back to their seats, we have a keynote presentation to kind of get us into the next session, warm us up. So everyone, do some shoulder rolls, get ready. We heard about youth, we heard about LDN, we heard about FAO's State of Report. Now we're going to hear about how to bring in the public and private investment. So I'm really honored to have our next keynote speaker. This is Barbara Barsma, and she is the CEO of Carbon Bank at Rabobank. And I'm not even going to try to do justice to all of her awards. her affiliations, the fact that she's a famous Dutch economist. Somehow she also is still a professor. So Barbara, give me 1 second to move my phone away from the speaker. And then Sabrina will stop sharing screen and we'll have you on full video here. And I will hand the floor over to you. Please do give your proper introduction.
Can I start, or is it still waiting?
I think you should start.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. The connection is really, cumbersome, let's put it like that. But I'm very happy to be present, although virtually. And I think that all of us present here at the event, be it virtually or physically, of the Coalition for Action for Soil Health at the United Nations Convention to combat desertification, we share a dream. We all know this. A world where we emit over 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalents every year into the atmosphere, and that about a quarter of all of those emissions come from food and agriculture. But let's now share the dream. Let's now imagine that farmers from all over the world can be a major part of the solution. They grow the trees, the crops, and work the soils that can meet the increased need for food and, critically important, help curb the climate change by reducing carbon emissions on their land and by removing carbon from the air and storing in their soils, crops, and trees. The carbon credits and the resulting extra income from the farmers, for the farmers, are not the only benefit. There is at least a triple dividend, I would say, of carbon farming. First of all, a healthier soil is more productive, resulting in higher crop yields for the farmer and a better provision of food for all of us, for consumers. Secondly, there is a lots of co-benefits like biodiversity, water management, better water management, that is higher nutritional quality and more resilience against extreme weather. And the third dividend is that carbon farming is based on using regenerative farming practices, and that has proven to actually reduce agricultural carbon footprint. So farmers are on top of the solution, standing right with their foots on the soil that can help remove carbon from the atmosphere and emit less carbon dioxide. Well, this triple dividend may sound like an unattainable dream, but it is actually not, because farmers from all over the world, we had some examples earlier, are working on this solution. And for this approach to really take off, we all need to work together. We need a multi-stakeholder action for scaling soil health globally through evidence-based public and private investment. And that's the title of this event. I work at Rabobank, one of the largest agri-food banks in the world. And within the Rabobank, I had the Rabo Carbon Bank. That is actually a startup we set up like halfway 2020. Next to my role at Rabobank, and he already said that, I am also professor of applied mathematical economics at the University of Amsterdam. And a long time ago, I wrote a PhD thesis on the monetary valuation of environmental goods. How can we put a price tag on goods and services that do have a value to society, to all of us, but that are not priced in the market? And now I am back where I started many years ago during this PhD. Because what are we doing at the Rabo Carbon Bank? What we do is we put a price tag on the sustainable contributions that farmers and food corporates can make to combat climate change, restore biodiversity, and increase food security. So together with our farmers and food corporates, we implement regenerative farming practices as well as reduction projects at farm level, and we can connect those carbon farmings with corporates who have committed themselves to achieving net zero carbon emissions in the foreseeable future. and are thus seeking to offset those carbon dioxide equivalent emissions that they cannot avoid or reduce yet. Farmers do not only need to be rewarded for their reductions and removal efforts, but they also need to get financial support prior to implementation of, for instance, regenerative farming practices or setting up reduction projects on their farm level. And Rabobank has a vital role to play here, as we're able to, for instance, pre-fund the farmer for the generation of credits and reduction units. And part of the one-stop shop for carbon farming that we are building now for the farmers, we also act as a bridge financier as we overcome the gap between the moment of investment and the moment of selling the credits and claimable reduction units. And as a result, we hope to accelerate the transition of farmers and help corporates to claim credible, verified reductions and removal units. Although I am, as an economist, convinced that government's intervention is really needed to price carbon, I think that we, as banks and businesses themselves, can also play their part. We shouldn't wait for government to put a price on carbon. A bank can reward parties that provide unpriced services that are of value to us all. That's what the Rabo Carbon Bank is all about. Within the Rabobank, we also conducted research using bank data into the relationship between sustainability of businesses, of farmers actually, and credit risks, because credit risk is, after all, the internal pricing mechanism of a bank. And the good news is there is a link. To put it very simply, on average, sustainable businesses have a lower credit risk. And that creates room to reward also from our internal pricing systems sustainable farmers with attractive financing conditions, for instance, lower interest rates. So then suddenly sustainability has become a rock-solid business aspect in lending for banks. But yet, we as a agri-food bank, we cannot realize the dream that I was talking about before. We can't realize it alone. We need further international actions and cooperations to revert current soil degradation processes. Member states from all over the world have yet to support a resolution on soil health at the UN FCCC based on the outcome of the UN Food Systems Summit and the development of this coalition of action for soil health, and also private sector guiding group of coalition on soil health. And that's why I'm here to tell you what we are doing within the Rabobank, the Rabo Carbon Bank, and offering you to share our experience, our learnings, the mistakes we make, the things that we learn, the successes we have, so that together we can make it happen. And that's also why, together with our partners, Rabobank is currently working on a, let's say, soil health resolution of soil champions that will be presented at the COP26 this November in Egypt. And it is a commitment to enable and scale soil carbon sequestration practices. Nature-based solutions can make an important contribution to combating climate change. I read not the entire IPCC report, the latest, because it was very thick, but if you look at some tables, you see that the potential of nature-based solutions is much bigger than previously thought. The projected economic mitigation potential of options in agriculture via improved and sustainable crop, livestock management, and carbon sequestration in agriculture, it can contribute an enormous amount, somewhere between 2 to 5.5 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalents per year in 2030. And that is comparable to the potential of wind energy. Yet, the use of carbon sequestration in agriculture to combat climate change is still very limited, whereas wind energy is much more popular. We all, NGOs, corporates, farmers, the financial sector, governments, we can and we should help to scale up this important nature-based solution space. And to help scale soil carbon sequestration practices, we, among other things, need member states to commit to, for instance, increase the role of responsible soil health policies in their national strategies. support work towards an international soil health standard so that we can really work together globally, or set up time-bound, science-based, realistic and national goals to stop soil degradations, and perhaps also include a specific soil health target into their national NDCs. Anyhow, these kinds of ideas, they are part of this resolution that we are working on for the COP27. But there's still lots of unsolved puzzles that prevent the market for voluntary nature-based carbon solutions from scaling. I'll just name two: additionality and permanence. How can the public and private sector work together on carbon farming without jeopardizing the additionality of the credits? Because if governments invest in carbon farming projects, that makes it really difficult for private parties to guarantee additionality, to be additional on what is already done by government. And additionality is actually necessary to realize high integrity credits on the voluntary carbon market. So governments that invest in soil sequestration out of good intentions can therefore discourage the private sector from also investing in soil sequestration. How can we solve this puzzle? How can we enable public-private co-investment instead of crowding out private initiative? And then permanence. At this moment, carbon credits are a reward for the extra influx of carbon in the soil. But how can we reward keeping carbon in the soil permanently? So how do we reward storage next to influx? I don't have the answer, but I need you, I need to work with all of you to get the answers so that together we can scale the market, solve these and other puzzles. And with that, I end this brief presentation and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Barbara, first, thank you so much for sticking with us. And we heard you, and you're actually full wall screen videoed in this room. So we see and hear you perfectly. And thank you so much. I don't think we have the capacity to do Q&A very flawlessly right now, so my apologies. But my goodness, between you and Bob Tanzi, now I feel my workload is really increased. We need these amazing ideas, right? Responsible soil health standards, international science-based time-bound goals, targets in the NDCs, really working together to solve these puzzles. So thank you so much. And I'm going to call up the panel now, but a sincere thank you for sticking with us and giving such a powerful, inspiring, and evidence-based keynote. Thank you again. Big round of applause. Great, so I'm very pleased to call up our panel. So as I say your name, you will walk graciously, not tripping over any of the obstacles here. Please, that is the requirement to make it here. So first, Dr. James Smith, he's the Director of Natural Climate Solutions at WBCSD. If you know what that stands for, you get a sticker. Oh, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, that's my sticker then. He leads WBCSD's work to scale private sector investment into natural climate solutions. Next, we have Tillam Berlas. She's leading the Sahel Great Green Wall focused work on for the World Economic Forum's 1T.org, a platform to conserve, restore, and grow a very small amount of trees, something like 1 trillion trees. Very ambitious. Online, we have John Crawford, who is the chair of strategy and technology in the Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow. He is a theoretical physicist with 30 years experience of research and happens to lead the Global Soil Health Program. Next, we have our distinguished scientist, Mr. Jerome Tonda. He's the land health scientist and soil biologist, so you have a friend here. At the World Agroforestry, he's based in Cote d'Ivoire, and he's been there since June 2000. And thank you. We have finally someone representing the public finance. Marie Aud-Evan joined IFAD in 2019 and has been providing technical assistance to the design and implementation of IFAD investment projects in multiple countries, and she's in charge of Asia Pacific. And by the way, Marie Aud and I met at the last COP, so believe me, it is worth it to make the trip and the connections here. So thank you so much to our panelists, and I cannot pretend to ask you thrilling questions, because if you remember, I am a soil scientist and you are all from the business sector. So I would really like to just give 5 minutes to each of you, James, to start us off, and I hope you will mention the Soil Investment Hub from WBCSD. Please tell us how the role of private sector in this initiative.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you on this topic today. I think when we discussed this, we were keen to get a little bit of an idea about what's working in the private sector and what might not be working, and what do we need to work on. I don't like the term "what's not working." I think we should use "needs improvement." So I'm going to stick to that phrasing. But so if we start with what I think that we're making progress with private sector investment in soil health, I think importantly the messaging is now getting through. Larger corporates involved in the food and ag space understand the importance of soil health in maintaining their value chains and underpinning the resilience of the smallholders and the farmers with which they work. So I think it's important, and it's good that that message is coming through. And so we're seeing that through a large number of commitments from companies to invest in soil health and regenerative agriculture, and we've seen those from Unilever and Caring, etc. I think what's also really exciting, it was great to see the presentation from Barbara with regards to the carbon bank. What is very exciting is that for the first time we now have an active market where we've put a price, we put a value on an ecosystem service. Now that's carbon, and because of that we're seeing far more investments in soil health and avoiding deforestation, all other types of land degradation, because we now understand the value and we've costed that service that we benefit from. So I think that's a great advance. In terms of what do I think needs improving, I think some of the private sector, they think, okay, well, we're finally working on climate, we're taking action on climate, and now we also need to take action on nature and soil and all these types of things. Oh, we're so focused with climate that maybe we don't have time on nature. And so I think we need to work with corporates to get them to understand these are all linked. Taking action on climate, taking action on nature, and working with local peoples and your stakeholders, they're a combined, interlinked issue. And you don't want to distinguish these when you're taking action. I think as well, we need to recognize we have, the private sector, and particularly food and agriculture, they have very, very complex supply chains, and that means they might not actually own the land that they're sourcing their products from, and they might actually not have full transparency of where they are sourcing from, and that makes it actually quite hard to funnel that finance down to the actual farmer on the ground. If they have very dynamic supply chains, they might be sourcing from different farmers within the same region on different years. Now that makes it quite hard to invest over the long term. If I could add one other thing, I'd also highlight just the importance of standards. That was raised again by Barbara. I think if we want to really escalate this and take this up to the top of the agenda for businesses, then we really need to do is provide them with some robust, accurate, and yet cost-effective and feasible KPIs and metrics so that they can understand when, what they need to be measuring and what they need to be aiming for when they set commitments to invest in soil health. And so the idea of an internationally accepted soil health standard is one which WBCSD very much supports, and is the type of activity that we are looking to pursue through our Soil Investment Hub, which I'm glad for the pitch there, Lee, that's fantastic. So we work with a coalition of around about 50 partners, and that includes the Cash Coalition. About 50% are private sector, and the other 50% are civil society organizations, research organizations. And I think it's by bringing all of these different stakeholders that have an interest in soil health together that we can start